History remembers the names of powerful generals and politicians, but the women who made victory possible often slip into silence. Among them was Nancy Wake, a glamorous socialite turned fierce spy, who became one of the Nazis' most wanted enemies. She didn't just fight behind enemy lines, she outsmarted them, blew up supply lines, and helped bring down Nazi power from within. But despite her heroism, the world almost forgot her name. Until now. Nancy Wake was born in Wellington, New Zealand in 1912 and raised in Sydney, Australia after her father abandoned the family. Even as a young girl, she had a fiery independence and a distaste for authority, a trait that would later become her greatest weapon. She wasn't a woman made for silence or obedience. She dreamt bigger than the domestic roles expected of her and carried herself with an air of defiance even in childhood. At 16, she left home and eventually made her way to London, where she trained as a journalist. By her early 20s, she had moved to Paris and began reporting across Europe. There, in the streets of 1930s Berlin and Vienna, she witnessed firsthand the rise of fascism, beatings in the street, flags raised in hatred, and people dragged from their homes for their religion. These weren't just stories to her, they were warnings. She saw clearly what many refused to believe, that war was coming, and it would demand more than silence. In Paris, she met and married Henri Fioca, a wealthy French industrialist, and for a short time, she lived the life many would envy: fine dresses, art salons, and luxury. But beneath the surface, her rage against the Nazi regime only grew. When the Germans invaded France, Nancy had a choice: flee with her wealth and safety intact, or stay and fight in the shadows. She didn't hesitate. While others backed down, Nancy stepped forward. Henry's support became instrumental to Nancy's work with the resistance later. However, after their marriage, Henri was forced to stay behind while Nancy continued her secretive work. Tragically, Henri was later captured and tortured by the Gestapo but never revealed any information about his wife's whereabouts or activities. Her beauty became her camouflage. The Gestapo nicknamed her the White Mouse because she was impossible to catch, slipping through borders, passing messages, and helping thousands of Allied soldiers escape. To many, she seemed like just another elegant woman with a bright smile and a Parisian accent. But inside, she was a storm, calculating, daring, and utterly fearless. And that's just where her story begins. When Germany invaded France in 1940, Nancy Wake didn't wait for permission. While much of the world hesitated in shock, Nancy began quietly building one of the most effective resistance networks in occupied France. What triggered her was not just political conviction, it was personal. She had seen Jewish families dragged from their homes, witnessed the cruelty of the Gestapo, and knew in her bones that someone had to fight back. She just decided that someone would be her. At first, she worked as a courier, carrying messages and smuggling supplies under the Nazis' noses. She used her charm like a blade, pretending to be a clueless socialite while orchestrating escapes and rerouting Allied airmen to safety. With false papers and coded phrases, she crisscrossed southern France, always calm, always one step ahead. But the danger wasn't theoretical. Every mission meant checkpoints, bribes, hidden weapons, and eyes watching her every move. The Gestapo placed her high on their most wanted list. She was labeled a key enemy of the Reich, and they had no idea that the elegant woman sipping wine in a Marseille cafe was the one responsible for countless escapes right under their boots. When her network was eventually compromised, she was forced to flee France through the Pyrenees Mountains, a brutal and freezing journey that nearly killed her. But even that didn't stop her. Nancy made her way to Britain and joined the Special Operations Executive, a secret British organization that trained agents in espionage, sabotage, and guerrilla warfare. There, she learned to parachute, kill silently, and handle explosives, and became one of the most highly trained female spies of the entire war. She wasn't just supporting the resistance anymore. She was the resistance. And soon, she would be sent back into France not as a courier, but as a commander. When Nancy Wake parachuted back into France in 1944, she didn't come quietly. Dropped into the Auvergne region under the cover of night, she carried with her radio codes, weapons, and orders to mobilize thousands of resistance fighters ahead of D-Day. The woman once seen as a socialite had transformed into one of the most feared and respected resistance leaders the Nazis would ever encounter. Commanding over 7,000 guerrilla fighters in the Maquis, the rural French resistance, Nancy planned ambushes, sabotaged supply lines, blew up bridges, and derailed trains, all to weaken German defenses before the Allied invasion. But she wasn't just giving orders from behind the lines. She was on the front lines, in combat boots and armed, often cycling over 300 kilometers through dangerous terrain just to replace lost radio codes or deliver intelligence. In one instance, when a radio operator lost his gear, she biked for 3 full days to find a new transmitter, dodging German patrols the entire way. She didn't just risk her life, she gave everything she had to the cause. Despite being outgunned and outnumbered, Nancy's network was devastatingly effective. Her leadership was so sharp, so fearless, that even hardened male commanders followed her without hesitation. She was called the White Mouse by the Gestapo for how she always escaped their traps, a nickname born from frustration and fear. Nancy Wake had gone from smuggling secret documents in her handbag to leading full-scale assaults against Nazi convoys. And all without losing the sharp wit and biting sarcasm that had always been her trademark. She didn't fit the mold of a wartime hero. That's what made her unforgettable. In the summer of 1944, as the Allied invasion of Normandy was underway, Nancy Wake's resistance unit was assigned a critical mission: to disrupt German troop movements in central France and prevent reinforcements from reaching the front lines. But this wasn't just about skirmishes and sabotage. This time, it involved hunting down key figures in the Nazi command. Working with the Special Operations Executive, SOE, Nancy coordinated deadly ambushes on German convoys, orchestrated demolitions of railway lines, and intercepted critical communications. One particularly impactful operation involved targeting German officers traveling between command posts, including General Wilhelm Ritter von Thoma, who was overseeing German armored divisions and closely involved in halting the Allied advance. The resistance learned of the general's route through painstaking intelligence work. Nancy helped plot a surprise ambush in a remote wooded area, positioning her fighters strategically along the road. When the convoy arrived, they opened fire with ruthless precision. The car carrying the general was hit. Von Thoma was severely wounded and later captured, effectively removing a key strategic leader from the Nazi command at a critical time. Nancy's actions didn't stop there. Her teams executed dozens of high-value missions over the following weeks, crippling German infrastructure and assassinating local collaborators and Gestapo officers. Her knowledge of terrain, quick thinking, and refusal to show fear made her a nightmare for the Nazis. Her name was added to the Gestapo's most wanted list, with a price of 5 million francs on her head, dead or alive. But they never caught her. Nancy Wake and her fighters didn't just disrupt enemy lines, they shifted the tide of the war in France. And yet, despite the scale of her contribution, few outside intelligence circles ever heard her name. Nancy Wake's reputation among both her comrades and enemies came from her uncanny ability to evade danger and hit back twice as hard. She had already been arrested once by the Vichy French police in 1943, suspected of resistance activities. But even then, her charm and quick wit worked in her favor. After 4 days of interrogation, she convinced them she was innocent and walked free. It was a close call, and it only strengthened her resolve. Soon after, the Gestapo was on her trail. Her husband, Henri Fiocca, stayed behind in Marseille to cover her escape. Nancy fled to Spain, hiking over the Pyrenees on foot in bitter cold, wearing high heels when she began the journey. It took days, and she nearly collapsed from exhaustion, but she made it to safety and eventually to Britain, where she joined the Special Operations Executive, the elite spy organization created to set Europe ablaze. It was during this period that she earned the nickname that would follow her for life, the White Mouse. Gestapo couldn't catch her, and her ability to slip through their fingers again and again infuriated them. In Nazi-occupied France, she was a ghost, appearing in one town to blow up a bridge, then vanishing before they could respond. She parachuted back into France in April 1944 to reunite with the resistance and prepare for the Allied invasion. Despite her small frame and refined appearance, she carried a backpack weighing nearly 40 pounds and led hundreds of fighters into battle. When male resistance members balked at taking orders from a woman, she proved herself in ways no one could deny, delivering coded messages under fire, biking 70 kilometers through enemy territory to restore radio contact, and even killing a German guard with her bare hands when he threatened to blow their cover. Nancy Wake didn't just escape capture, she outsmarted one of the most brutal security forces in history and became a legend whispered about in Nazi command centers. Nancy Wake's legacy is one of immense bravery and determination. Despite her critical role in the French resistance and her daring actions that helped turn the tide of the war, her story was almost lost to history. After the war, she was recognized with numerous honors, including the George Medal and the prestigious Legion of Honor. Yet, her name didn't become widely known, and for many years, her achievements were overshadowed by others. One of the reasons her story faded is that she herself was reluctant to embrace fame. While other war heroes, particularly male leaders, basked in public recognition, Nancy lived quietly after the war, preferring to keep a low profile. She downplayed her role, often deflecting attention away from her personal contributions to the war effort. As a result, the press didn't focus on her as much as they did other wartime figures. Another factor contributing to her obscurity is the era's tendency to overlook women in combat roles. The dominant narrative of World War II focused primarily on men, especially military leaders and generals, whose stories were more readily embraced by historians and the media. This overshadowed the work of resistance fighters like Nancy, whose contributions were often marginalized because of her gender. Furthermore, the very nature of her work, covert, clandestine, and done in the shadows, meant that she didn't operate in the public eye. While her missions were crucial to the success of the Allies, much of her most vital work was kept under wraps. This made her story more difficult to document and celebrate in real time. It wasn't until much later, after Nancy had passed away, that her story was finally brought to light. Her heroism was gradually recognized by a new generation eager to learn about the unsung figures who shaped history in ways that traditional narratives often ignored. Now, Nancy Wake is celebrated as one of the most outstanding women of World War II, but it's a legacy that took decades to come into full view. Nancy Wake's legacy continues to inspire people around the world, especially women, to embrace courage, resilience, and determination. Her story serves as a reminder that even when history tries to erase the contributions of extraordinary individuals, their impact cannot be forgotten. Do you think Nancy Wake's story should have been told sooner? What other unsung heroes of World War II do you think deserve more recognition? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, the simple, easy and free way to support us is by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. Don't forget to tap the bell icon. This way you take control of what you watch instead of letting the algorithm decide for you. See you in the next story.